I spent my 30th birthday sitting alone at a table meant for 6. The restaurant glowed with soft amber light, the kind that made everything look warmer than it felt. Families laughed around me, forks, clinking glasses, toasting candles, flickering on little plates of cake brought out by smiling waiters. I tried to sit tall in my chair, tried to pretend nothing was wrong, but every time the door opened, my heart jumped like a fool waiting to be chosen. My parents had promised they would be there. My sister Lacey had promised too, said she wouldn't miss it for the world. Said she already knew what she was going to order, said the kids were excited to see Aunt Ava on her big day. But I was the only one who showed up. At the 40-minute mark, the waiter came by for the 3rd time and asked if I wanted to start with appetizers. I told him I'd wait. At the 1-hour mark I called. Lacey picked up. I could hear music behind her, wild, messy, joyful. A party! She didn't bother to step outside. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with that careless little laugh she'd perfected since her 20s. "Your age means nothing to us." Just like that, no apology, no shame, no explanation. Just a casual dismissal of the moment I had waited for all month. Something inside me didn't break, it went quiet. Quiet in a way that felt dangerous. Quiet in a way that felt like the beginning of something I couldn't name yet. I sat still, the phone still warm in my hand, and let the silence consume me. Around me, people celebrated their milestones, their marriages, their anniversaries. And I sat there invisible at my own birthday dinner, my napkin still perfectly folded on my lap. I don't know how long I stared at the door after that call. Maybe minutes, maybe longer. Enough time for my hope to shrivel into something small and cold. I lifted my water glass, took a sip I couldn't taste, and tried to understand how I had become the person no one bothered to show up for. The waiter approached again, slow and hesitant. "Would you like to order now?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Just the check, please." He hesitated, eyes soft with pity. "Are you sure?" I nodded. Pity was still better than abandonment. While he walked away, I pulled out my phone again. A new notification flashed across the screen, an Instagram story from Lacey. She was at a rooftop bar, drink in hand, my parents behind her laughing, the city skyline glowing behind them. The caption said, family night, a nicer, happier, complete family just without me." Something inside my chest shifted like a door locking from the inside. I paid for my untouched water and left the restaurant without looking back. Outside, the night air hit me like a punishment, sharp, cold, honest. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and started walking toward my car. My heels clicked on the pavement, echoing down the quiet street, each step sounding like a reminder that I was completely, utterly alone. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, hands gripping the wheel, my breath shaky. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too stunned to cry. Too stunned to feel anything except the growing chill spreading across my chest. Eventually, I turned the key and drove home in silence, headlights carving 2 lonely lines across the dark road. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want noise. I wanted the truth to be loud enough to hear. My family had skipped my 30th birthday, and they hadn't even tried to hide it. When I got home, my apartment felt foreign, like I'd stepped into a stranger's life. I set my purse down, kicked off my shoes, and walked straight to the kitchen table. For 3 years, every week, like clockwork, I'd sat in that exact chair every Friday morning and opened my banking app to send $700 to Lacey. $700 I worked for. $700 that had slowly reshaped my life around their needs. I pulled out my chair and sat down. My phone was still in my hand. My thumb hovered over the screen almost on instinct. The habit was too strong. Even after they skipped my birthday, even after Lacey's cruel words, my body still moved like I owed them something. A message buzzed on my phone. It was from Lacey. "So, about the 700. Can you send it tonight? We're short this week." Nothing about the birthday. Nothing about missing dinner. Nothing about the fact that she'd told me my age meant nothing. Just another demand. Another expectation. Another week where I was supposed to sacrifice myself so she didn't have to. My hands began to tremble, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. For the first time since they started using me, I didn't respond. I put the phone face down on the table and leaned back in my chair. The silence around me shifted. It no longer felt empty, it felt like space. Space I had never allowed myself. Space I didn't even know I needed until that moment. I thought about every holiday they'd missed, every excuse they gave, every time I'd waited for them to remember I existed. And I thought about the 3 years of money flowing out of my account like water through cupped hands. It wasn't just the money. It was the abandonment packaged as normalcy. It was the betrayal disguised as family. It was the toxic favoritism I'd been trained to excuse since childhood. I rose from the table slowly, as if standing in a new body, a new mind, a new version of myself that didn't exist the night before. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty street lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. It was the quietest the world had felt in a long time. And for the first time, the quiet didn't scare me. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Lacey. It was a message from an unknown number. "You don't know the full story. Stop sending them money." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, breath freezing in my chest. A second message followed. "They talk about you when you're not around. Be careful." I felt the world tilt just slightly, enough to know that whatever was happening in my family wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just cruelty. It was something deeper, something darker, something intentional. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid of how far it might go, and how much more I was about to uncover. The morning after my 30th birthday felt strangely hollow, as if the air itself had been emptied out during the night. I woke up still wearing the dress I had bought just for them to see its fabric wrinkled and cold against my skin. My mascara had smudged, leaving faint shadows beneath my eyes, ghosts of a celebration that never happened. For a moment, I tried to remember why I had gone to bed without changing, and then it all came rushing back like a wave hitting the shore too fast. The restaurant, the empty chairs, Lacey's laugh. "Your age means nothing to us." I pressed a hand to my face, exhaled shakily, and reached for my phone on the nightstand, not because I expected an apology, but because I needed something solid to focus on. The screen lit up with 3 missed calls from Lacey and 1 from my mother. I opened the messages. Lacey, morning. "Did you forget the 700 Mom said she didn't see the transfer?" A second message, "Hello, we're waiting." Not a single word about my birthday. Not one sentence asking if I was okay. Not even a flimsy excuse for not showing up. Just the same demand, the $700 that had somehow become the only thread tying us together. I closed my eyes. When did I become nothing more than a weekly deposit? 3 years ago it had started so innocently, so gently, so deceptively. I remember sitting on my sofa in my old apartment, 27 years old, fresh off a promotion at the design agency. I was proud back then, hopeful, excited about building my own future. Then Lacey called, voice trembling with panic. "Ava, can I talk to you about something? It's serious." She said their mortgage was behind, that her husband Daniel had been laid off, that the kids needed new winter coats and she didn't know what to do. She kept apologizing, saying she hated asking for anything, saying she felt like a burden. "I just need help for a little while," she said, "until we get back on our feet." I remember the guilt in her voice, the fear. And I remember thinking, she's my sister. Of course I'll help. I sent her $700. It felt like the right thing to do. Back then, Mom and Dad praised me for it. "You're doing a good thing," my mother told me. "Lacey has so much on her plate. You're lucky you don't have all that responsibility." Lucky. That was the word she used. Over the next weeks, the requests came subtly, gently, almost sweetly wrapped in gratitude. The car needed a repair. The kids needed school supplies. The utilities got too high this month. Every time I sent the money, they called me a blessing. Every time I pressed transfer, I felt like I mattered, like I was helping hold the family together. Somewhere along the line, gratitude turned into expectation. Months passed. The thank yous grew shorter. Then they became emojis. Then they became reminders sent the night before. Don't forget tomorrow. We need it early this week. Can you add an extra 100 things are tight? Tight. Things always seem tight for them. Always dire. Always urgent. Meanwhile, I started saying no to small pleasures, turning down dinners with coworkers, canceling hair appointments, switching from fresh produce to whatever was on sale. Once I pushed a dentist appointment back 3 months because I couldn't afford the copay after sending Lacey the extra $200 she desperately needed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself family helped family. But slowly, quietly, that help became habit. It was during one of those early months that my father said something that stuck to my ribs like glue. We were sitting on my parents' couch after Sunday dinner when he placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't have to worry, Ava. One day everything we have will be yours anyway." He said it so casually, so surely, as if promising that my generosity would be repaid someday. As if reminding me that I shouldn't question anything because my reward was waiting in the future. I didn't know then how cruel that promise really was. I pulled myself back into the present as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the morning light, bleeding through the blinds. My phone buzzed again. "Lacey, today, Ava. We need it today." I put the phone down without replying. For the first time in 3 years, I let the message sit there unanswered. Later that day, I attempted to distract myself with errands. Grocery shopping. Laundry. Cleaning the kitchen. But the echo of their expectation followed me like a shadow. I kept replaying all the times they'd overlooked me. All the little cracks that had appeared long before my birthday. Thanksgiving when they'd canceled at the last minute because Lacey wasn't feeling well, only for me to see pictures of them at her friend's dinner later that night. Christmas when I'd bought thoughtful gifts for the kids, and Lacey forgot mine in her car. The countless times my father had said, "Your sister needs more from us. You're stronger." Stronger. Translation: You'll survive without us. One particular afternoon came back to me. One so small I almost forgot it. I had come over for dinner, arms filled with groceries because Mom said she needed help cooking. I walked into the house and heard her whispering in the kitchen, her voice low and sharp. "Don't tell Ava about the account," she said. "She doesn't need to know." I froze. I didn't understand then. I wasn't supposed to. Now the memory made my stomach twist. That evening, after forcing myself to eat something small, I sat on my sofa scrolling through Instagram, something I never should have done. There they were again, my parents and Lacey at a local winery. A picture posted only a month earlier. My parents' grinning glasses raised Lacey wearing a new dress I was sure I'd indirectly paid for. The caption read, "Family time is everything." I stared at it until the words blurred. Family time. Everything. Everything except me. I threw my phone onto the cushion beside me and leaned forward, pressing my hands to my face. I felt exhausted, used, lost. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're giving them everything. They're giving you nothing." Another buzz. "Stop sending them money. You're not their family. You're their ATM." I didn't move for a full minute. My heart thudded violently in my chest. Who was sending these messages? How did they know? How long had someone been watching this happen? But the worst question of all was the one forming slowly in my mind, the one I couldn't push away. What else didn't I know? I swallowed hard and leaned back, pulling my knees to my chest. For the first time, the thought slipped into my mind, sharp and unwelcome. What if the 700 wasn't helping them survive? What if it was helping them live better without me? Outside, a car drove by, headlights sweeping across my living and room walls. The world moved on quietly indifferent, and I sat there suddenly aware of every moment I had overlooked, every sign I had ignored, every excuse I had accepted without question. A part of me wanted to send the money just to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to avoid being the daughter and sister who disrupted the family rhythm. But I didn't. I didn't send it that night, or the next morning, or the one after that, and as the silence grew heavier, as the guilt tried clawing its way back inside me, a new understanding took shape, a small steady truth rising inside my chest. If I wanted to know who I really was without them, this was the only way to find out. And whether I liked it or not, the moment I didn't send the money was the moment everything started to change. The voicemail from my father played on a loop in my mind for the rest of the night. "Ava, your sister told us you're being difficult. Call us back immediately. We need to talk about your responsibilities to this family." Responsibilities. That word had followed me my entire life like an invisible leash. The morning light crept into my apartment, as if unsure whether it belonged there. I wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee, letting the warmth seep into the parts of me that felt cold and bruised. I didn't feel rested. I felt suspended, caught between the version of myself I had been for years and the one I was becoming. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. "Remember to send the 700 today. Lacey is counting on you." No mention of my birthday. No mention of the dinner they skipped. No mention of the hurt they had carved into me. Just need. Just expectation. Just the same mechanical demand I'd been trained to obey. I set the phone down slowly, as if it might explode. For a few moments, I let my mind drift back to every holiday. They'd abandoned me for Lacey's last-minute plans, every celebration. I'd prepared only to end up waiting alone, every promise they'd tossed aside with excuses that felt practiced and easy. 2 years ago, it was Thanksgiving. I had cooked an entire meal, turkey, stuffing, pie, everything, the way Mom taught me growing up. The house smelled like cinnamon and warmth. I'd set the table with the good dishes, lit the candles, and waited. At 3 o'clock, Mom texted to say they couldn't make it. "Lacey's not feeling well. We'll see you this weekend." I believed them until I saw photos later that night of Lacey at a friend's dinner, dressed up, smiling, leaning across the table for a toast, while my parents sat beside her. In the photo, my mother wrote family time with 3 heart emojis. Family, without me. Then Christmas came. I spent weeks picking out gifts. I knew they'd love Lacey's favorite scented lotion, Dad's preferred brand of coffee, a bracelet Mom had admired in a store window. I brought them all to my parents' house on Christmas Eve, wrapped neatly with labels in neat handwriting. They never showed up. Lacey sent a text at midnight. "Kids are too tired. We'll stop by next week." They didn't. The gifts sat in my car for 2 months before I finally donated them. Some people think betrayal happens in a sudden crash, a dramatic moment where everything shatters. But what I learned was that family betrayal happens slowly, like water damage. You don't see the destruction until the wall caves in. Later that afternoon, I walked over to my parents' neighborhood to clear my mind. I didn't plan on stopping by their house, just wanted to breathe different air. The houses were quiet, the yards meticulously kept. My parents' home looked picture-perfect from the outside, every flower pot placed just so. Their neighbor Marlene waved from her porch. She was in her early 70s, gentle-eyed, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, even if her own children didn't. "You look tired, sweetheart," she called out. "You doing okay?" I hesitated, but something in her soft concern cracked me open. "I'm fine," I said, but my voice didn't sound convincing. Marlene tilted her head. "I've lived long enough to know when someone is carrying more than they should." I looked down at my shoes, unable to hold her gaze. "It's just family stuff," she sighed, nodding knowingly. "Your family takes from you, Ava. I've seen it. They come and go with their arms full of things you pay for." The honesty stung. I didn't know what to say. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I've seen more than you think. They treat you differently. And it isn't right." My throat tightened. "How do you know?" "Because I've watched them," Marlene said simply. "They're always here, all of them, every weekend, every holiday. I blinked. "They're always here." "Oh yes," she said. "Your parents babysit the kids. They take them out. They have cookouts. They're very involved with Lacey." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the world around me. "They never tell me," I whispered. Marlene's eyes softened. "I know, darling." I thanked her and walked away before my emotions spilled over. The truth cut deeper than I expected. My family had built an entire life together without me even knowing. They didn't forget to include me. They excluded me on purpose. That night, still shaken by Marlene's words, I sat on my sofa scrolling through my parents' Facebook pages, something I rarely did because it usually hurt too much. I found an entire album titled Walker Family Moments. In photo after photo, I watched my parents holding Lacey's kids, smiling at barbecues, sitting beside her at school events, wearing matching shirts on a family hike. 3 years of photos, 3 years of memories, 3 years of togetherness. I wasn't in a single one. Not even by accident. A newer photo appeared just a month old. My parents and Lacey sitting at a fancy restaurant, leaning in for a group selfie with cocktails in their hands. The caption said, "Cheers to my favorites." I stared at that word until it felt like a wound. My stomach clenched and I set my phone down. It wasn't just that they forgot me. They had chosen to build a family without me. They had chosen to let me send money while they lived comfortably, joyfully together. I stood up and paced the room, my mind spinning. Why had I never questioned it? Why had I accepted the scraps of affection they tossed my way? Why had I believed their excuses year after year? Around 9 that night, a new message buzzed on my phone. "Unknown number. You're giving them everything. They're giving you nothing." I stared at the text, heart pounding. Another message followed. "Stop sending them money. You're not part of their family. Not really." I swallowed hard, a cold wave rolling through me. The words were too accurate, too sharp, too perfectly aligned with everything I had discovered in the last 24 hours. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response, just silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty screen. Something had shifted, something about my understanding of what my family was capable of. Something that told me the cracks had started forming long before I ever noticed them. And as the night stretched on, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't afraid of losing them anymore. I was afraid of discovering just how long they'd been losing me. The messages from the unknown number stayed in the back of my mind like a whisper I couldn't unhear. "You're not part of their family. Not really." I tried to shake it off, tell myself it was someone messing with me, but the words clung to me like humidity in the air. I reread them twice before bed, and again the next morning when sunlight spilled across my kitchen floor. My coffee tasted bitter, my chest felt tight, and underneath it all was the same quiet truth growing louder by the hour. Someone out there knew something I didn't. But the part that unsettled me most wasn't the warning. It was the accuracy. That Saturday morning, I forced myself out of the apartment and walked downtown. I needed noise, movement, anything that wasn't the silence of my living room weighing down on me like a confession. Families sat outside cafes, sipping lattes, children tugged at their parents' hands, and couples laughed as if the world was simple. I passed a group of women celebrating a birthday, bright hats, a sparkly sash, a cupcake with a candle. Their joy was effortless. Mine felt foreign now. I sat on a bench near the fountain and scrolled through my phone even though I knew I shouldn't. Lacey's social media never failed to hurt, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. I typed her name into the search bar, and there it was, another post from last night. My parents and Lacey at a backyard barbecue I never knew about. The table was full of food, kids running around, everyone smiling. My mother's arms wrapped tightly around Lacey's youngest. The caption read, "Love these family nights." That word again. Family. And again without me. As I stared at the photo, I suddenly remembered something Marlene had said the day before. "They're always together, Ava. Every weekend. Every holiday." She'd spoken it so plainly, so gently, like she already knew it would hurt me. I studied the picture closely. My parents were wearing the same clothes Marlene had described. The timeline matched perfectly. They weren't hiding that they were together. They just weren't telling me. My stomach twisted as I scrolled further. A post from 2 weeks ago showed them at a winery. Another from 3 weeks earlier showed them at a local fair with the caption, "A perfect day with my favorites." There were photos of brunches, picnics, shopping trips, all the things I had once dreamed of having with my own family, and not once had I been invited. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't the events themselves that hurt, it was the deliberate erasure. They weren't forgetting me. They were choosing not to include me. The pain hit so sharply I had to look up at the sky just to force the tears back down. I stood abruptly, needing to move, needing air. I began walking without any real direction until I found myself approaching my parents' neighborhood. I slowed at Marlene's yard when I saw her trimming her rose bushes. She smiled when she spotted me. "Hi, sweetheart," she said warmly. "You're out early today." I nodded. Just needed some fresh air. Marlene's eyes softened as she set down her gardening gloves. "Rough week," I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. That obvious she walked closer. "I've been on this earth a long time. I know when someone is carrying more than they can hold." I swallowed. I don't think I'm part of their lives the way I thought. Marlene sighed, shaking her head. "Honey, I've seen how they act. They depend on you when it's convenient. But when it comes to showing up, they don't." I blinked. "You've noticed, everyone has," she said kindly. "Your parents talk about all the things they do with Lacey and the kids, but your name hardly comes up." I felt something inside me sink. They never told me. "I know," she said softly, "and that's the worst part." I bit my lip and nodded, thanking her before walking away again. Her words didn't feel judgmental, they felt honest, and honesty hurt more than any insult ever could. As I turned onto my parents' street, I told myself I was just walking by. I didn't plan on knocking, didn't plan on confronting anything, but when I reached their driveway, I saw something that made me stop cold. Through the front window, I saw Lacey sitting at the dining table with my mother. Papers were spread out across the table. My mother was pointing at something with a pen, and Lacey nodded, smiling in that tight, self-satisfied way she did whenever she got exactly what she wanted. Something about the scene felt wrong, too focused, too secretive. I ducked behind the mailbox before either of them could look up. What were they discussing? Why were there papers? Why had they kept me out of everything? The longer I watched, the more familiar everything felt. That house, that table, that family dynamic. It was a picture I no longer recognized myself in. My chest tightened with the unmistakable ache of being replaced. I left before they could see me, my pulse hammering. I didn't want them to know I was there. I didn't want to give them the chance to pretend nothing was happening. By the time I got home, my anxiety had shifted into something sharper, heavier. I sat down on the edge of my bed and opened my laptop again, going straight to Lacey's profile, even though I knew it would hurt. And then I saw it. A selfie of my parents and Lacey, posted just a month earlier, all dressed up at an expensive restaurant. My mother had her hand on Lacey's shoulder. My father had his arm around her. Lacey's caption read, "Celebrating life with the people who matter most." I felt my breath catch in my throat. Another photo showed all of them at a small indoor concert. Another showed them at a mini family reunion I hadn't been invited to, even though cousins I barely knew were there. And then another Lacey, holding my mother's hand at a holiday parade. The final blow was a birthday post for my mother. Lacey had written, "So lucky to have you as my best friend. You've always been there for me." I checked the date. It was the same day I had worked late and sent Mom a message asking if she wanted to grab dinner. She replied, "Too tired, sweetheart. Maybe another time." I stared at the photo until everything inside me went silent. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number, you're giving them everything, they're giving you nothing." Another message, "Stop, before they take even more." My hands trembled as I held the phone. The words felt too close, too true, too perfectly aligned with everything I had uncovered. I typed back, "Who are you?" No reply. Just the quiet buzz of my apartment. The hum of the refrigerator, my own breathing, in the empty room. I set the phone down slowly, feeling a tremor travel through my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was recognition. My family didn't forget me. They built a life without me. A life that thrived on my silence. A life I was only useful to when they needed something. And for the first time, the thought didn't devastate me. It enraged me. It awakened something I had buried for years, a part of me that wondered what my life could be if I stopped accepting scraps, a part of me that whispered quietly, fiercely, maybe it's time to stop being the one they can depend on. Maybe it's time to depend on myself. On the morning of my 30th birthday, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't had in a long time: hope. Foolish, blinding hope. The kind you cling to, even when reality keeps showing you it has no place in your life. I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, trying on dresses, brushing my hair twice, checking my reflection like I was meeting someone important. My family. I was meeting my family. I put on a deep green dress I hadn't worn in years, one that made me feel like myself again. I added earrings, a touch of mascara, and a soft shade of lipstick. I told myself today would be simple, warm. They would show up. They had to. I even packed a little gift bag for my parents, just something small to thank them for always being there, a phrase I still used out of habit rather than truth. I slipped handmade cards into envelopes for Lacey's kids, imagining their smiles even though I hadn't seen them in months. The entire drive to the restaurant I rehearsed conversations in my head, updates about work, a funny story about my coworker, anything to fill the empty spaces. I pictured Lacey's face lighting up when she walked through the door. I imagined Mom hugging me tight. I imagined Dad ordering a bottle of wine for the birthday girl. I imagined being loved. The restaurant was beautiful, warm lights, soft piano music, white tablecloths. The hostess led me to a table set for 6 near the back, a perfect little corner. I arrived 15 minutes early because I didn't want them to walk in before me. By 6 o'clock, I was checking the door every few seconds. By 6:15, I'd finished half a glass of water. By 6:30, the waiter approached with a sympathetic smile. "Would you like to start with something to drink?" "Just water for now," I said. "My family's on their way." At 6:45, I texted the group chat. "Hey, I'm here. Did we say 7 instead?" No problem if we did. The message was delivered but not read. Families around me laughed, ordered appetizers, took pictures. My table stayed painfully empty. The candles flickered, reminding me time was moving forward even if I wasn't. At 7 o'clock, I finally called my mother. Straight to voicemail. I tried Dad next. Same thing. My heart started beating too hard. Maybe something happened. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe Lacey forgot her phone at home. Maybe my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Lacey had posted a story 60 seconds earlier. She stood on a rooftop bar, glittering city lights behind her hair, styled perfectly, a drink in her hand. I heard music, loud thumping, filled with celebration. My parents were behind her, laughing, drinks raised high. The caption said, "We needed this, much better plan than tonight." My breath caught like someone had punched me. Much better plan than my birthday dinner. I swallowed hard, hands shaking as I dialed Lacey. This time she picked up, but she didn't bother stepping away from the noise. What she shouted over the music? "Where are you?" My voice came out thin, trembling. "What do you mean?" she asked, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "I'm at the restaurant," I said. "The one we planned. The one you said you wouldn't miss." There was a pause. Then that careless laugh I knew too well. "Oh, yeah. We changed plans. Changed plans." My voice cracked. "Tonight was Ava," she cut in, sounding bored. "Your age means nothing to us. It's not a big deal." Behind her, I heard laughter, my mother's laugh, bright and unmistakable. My father's voice, saying something about ordering another round. My heart didn't just drop. It fell through me, hollow and heavy. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I hung up, because staying on the phone felt like standing in the middle of a road waiting to be hit. People don't realize betrayal is quiet. It doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. It sits with you silently while everyone else keeps celebrating. The waiter returned, his expression soft. "Would you like to order something now?" I shook my head. "Just the check." He glanced at the untouched table and nodded gently. "Of course, and happy birthday." It took everything in me not to cry right there. I paid for the water and walked out, heels clicking on the tile, my throat burning. Outside, the night air wrapped around me like ice. I walked to my car slowly, like my body wasn't connected to itself. When I finally sat in the driver's seat, I held the steering wheel with both hands, just to keep from falling apart. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed again. I grabbed it, a pathetic flicker of hope rising inside me. Maybe they realized how cruel they were. Maybe it was a message from Lacey. "So, about the 700, can you send it tonight? We're short this week." Something inside me cracked so loudly I almost heard it. There it was, the truth laid bare. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was a wallet. A weekly deposit. A convenience. I stared at the message, waiting for anger or tears or something to rise, but nothing came. I felt empty, scraped clean. I drove home in silence. No radio, no thoughts. Just the steady hum of the engine and the streetlights passing by like ghosts. When I finally entered my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I kicked off my heels, the dress falling against my legs like defeat. I walked to my kitchen table and sat down, my hands resting flat on the wood. For 3 years, that table was where I sent the $700 every week. 3 years of choosing their needs over mine. 3 years of shrinking myself to fit their expectations. 3 years of believing that sacrifice was the same as love. And this was the thanks I got. My phone buzzed again. "Unknown number tonight" wasn't an accident. They planned it. I stared at the message, my heart suddenly beating again, fast, loud, terrified. Before I could respond, another message came through. "You're not their priority. You're their backup plan." I gripped the edge of the table, breath unsteady. This wasn't just my imagination. Someone else saw it. Someone else knew. My hands shook as I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. Just silence stretching around me like a warning. I leaned back slowly, the truth settling over me like a new kind of gravity. They hadn't forgotten my birthday. They never intended to come. And for the first time in 30 years, I understood something I'd spent my whole life avoiding. If I kept giving them everything, they'd leave me with nothing. And maybe it was time to finally stop. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness in my chest, the kind that feels like someone had placed a brick right over my heart. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't reach for my banking app before I even brushed my teeth. My thumb hovered for a moment, out of habit, then lowered. I sat at the edge of my bed, still in my pajamas, staring at the quiet room around me. The silence didn't feel empty the way it used to. It felt suspended, waiting. I walked to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the table where I had spent countless Fridays sending $700 without fail. The sunlight came in soft and pale through the blinds falling across my hands. I wrapped them around the mug and whispered the word I had never dared say aloud. No, just that. One syllable. But it felt like tearing down a wall with bare hands. By 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed for the first time. "Lacey, did you forget the money?" I placed the phone face down and took another sip of coffee. 10 minutes later, another buzz. "Lacey, hello, we're waiting." Still nothing about the birthday. Nothing about the dinner. Nothing about the hurt she carved into me so easily. I left the phone where it was and went about my morning. I cleaned the sink, folded a blanket on the couch, watered my plants. Every vibration made my shoulders tense, but I didn't give in. Not this time. At 11, the buzzing turned into a call. Lacey's name lit up the screen. I hesitated only long enough to draw a breath, then answered. "Ava, what is going on?" she snapped. "No hello, no concern. I'm not sending anything this week," I said calmly. I surprised myself with how steady I sounded. There was silence, then a scoff. What do you mean you're not sending it? You can't just decide that. I already decided. You're being ridiculous, she spit. We're counting on that money. You can't just stop. But I could, and I had. I ended the call before she could say more, before she could twist my guilt into something heavy and suffocating. But the moment I set my phone down, it rang again, this time my mother. I answered. Ava, she said sharply. What are you doing to your sister? She's in tears. You know they depend on that money. I know, I said quietly. That's the problem. My mother let out a short, irritated huff. Don't start with this. You know Lacey has the kids. You know what she's dealing with. She didn't even show up to my 30th birthday, I said, feeling my throat tighten. Oh, for heaven's sake, she snapped. You're being dramatic. They had other plans. Other plans. They had other plans for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for family events they attended without me, for every moment that mattered. You could at least acknowledge, I began, but she cut me off. We're not doing this. Just send the money. No. The silence that followed felt like a blast of icy wind. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was laced with something I couldn't place. Not sadness. Not disappointment. Fear. We need it, Ava, she said quietly. We depend on it. Not Lacey. Not the kids. We. The realization hit me with the force of a punch they had been living off me. All of them. I ended the call. My hands trembled, but not from guilt, from clarity. That afternoon was a storm of internal battles. Part of me screamed that I was abandoning them. Another part reminded me that they had abandoned me long before. I walked in circles around my apartment, sat down, stood back, stood by the window, leaned against the wall. Every few minutes my phone buzzed again, texts from Lacey, my mother, even my father. Dad, this behavior is unacceptable. Call us now. Another from Lacey. The kids will suffer because of you. 2 minutes later, we're out of groceries. Then, a picture, a nearly empty fridge. But once I zoomed in, I saw it. 3 bottles of expensive wine tucked in the bottom shelf. My hands shook with disbelief, then with anger. My family wasn't starving. They weren't struggling. They were manipulating me. And I had let them. As the messages kept coming, I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank records. I scrolled through every weekly transfer, every emergency, every extra $100 or $200 for reasons that now seemed fabricated. I started writing them down, every date, every time, every excuse. $700 a week for 3 years. I did the math. The number sat on the screen like a weight. My chest tightened, my eyes burned. But instead of crying, something inside me steadied. It wasn't just money they took, it was my time, my health, my peace, my holidays, my place in the family. At 5 o'clock, when the light outside began to dim, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, good. Don't give them another $1. They're hiding more than you know. A second message followed instantly. Be prepared. They're angry because they're scared. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Someone knew. Someone was watching. But for the first time, the idea didn't terrify me. It made me feel less alone. That evening, I made dinner for myself, something simple, something warm. I sat at the table with a bowl of soup and the list of transfers in front of me. I drew a line under the last one and wrote the words, "This ends now." When I lay in bed that night, I felt strangely calm. The guilt still knocked at the back of my mind, but it wasn't strong enough to pull me under. Instead, the truth whispered louder. If they loved me, they would have shown up. If they cared, they would have remembered. If I mattered, I wouldn't be fighting this alone. I turned off the lamp and stared into the darkness, listening to my heartbeat slow. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them. I was afraid of what I would discover next. And somewhere underneath that fear was something new, something soft, something fragile, hope. Hope that walking away from being their provider might finally let me become something else. My own person. The anonymous text kept echoing through my mind long after I turned off my bedroom light. Ask about the house. It's not in your name anymore. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 3 years, every ignored holiday, every skipped birthday, every time my parents insisted. I helped my sister because family should take care of each other. Family. The word felt sour now. By the time morning came, I was running on 2 hours of sleep and a rising tide of dread. I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through the property records website like I was searching for a stranger's name. But it wasn't a stranger. It was mine. It didn't appear. The Walker family home, the one my parents always said would eventually belong to me, now listed 3 owners: Frank Walker, Judith Walker, Lacey Carter. My name wasn't there. Not even in the historical ownership log. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. They didn't just lean on me, they erased me. A hollow coldness settled in my stomach. The anonymous message hadn't been a warning. It had been confirmation. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and drove to my parents' house before I could talk myself out of it. I rehearsed the confrontation on the way there, but the words shattered as soon as I pulled into the driveway. The house looked harmless. Warm curtains drawn, porch light off, wind chimes softly tapping in the breeze. The same house I grew up in, the same one I'd painted with my dad when I was 9, the same one where I scraped my knees learning to ride a bike, the same one where I'd once believed safety lived. I knocked. My mother opened the door almost immediately, her expression tightening when she saw me. "Ava, we didn't know you were coming. I need to talk to you," I said. Her eyes flicked down to my hands, probably expecting a grocery bag or envelope of cash. When she saw nothing, her expression sharpened. "Well, come in," she said reluctantly. The living room felt different. Subtle things: the new leather sofa I'd never seen before, Lacey's kids' toys piled in the corner, a fresh coat of paint on the walls. It looked less like my childhood home and more like an extension of Lacey's world. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "In the kitchen," Mom replied. "We're busy today. Busy." The same tone they used on my birthday. My father walked in a moment later. He didn't smile. He folded his arms instead, like he was preparing for a scolding. "What's this visit about?" he asked, stiffly. I didn't stall. I didn't soften. I didn't pretend. "Why is the house in your names and Lacey's, but not mine?" My father's jaw clenched. My mother's eyes darted away. "I looked it up," I continued. "I saw the documents." Silence filled the room like thick smoke. My mother cleared her throat. "We didn't want to upset me." My voice cracked. "You took me off the house without even telling me." My father straightened. "We didn't take you off anything. Your name was never on it. That's not what you told me years ago." His eyes hardened. Circumstances changed. "Explain it," I said, my voice trembling. "Explain why Lacey's name is there and mine isn't." My mother opened her mouth, but before she could form a lie, a familiar voice cut through the air. "She needed the security," Lacey said, stepping in from the hallway. I hadn't realized she was there. She walked toward us with an entitled little smirk on her face, the same one she wore at the rooftop bar while I sat alone on my birthday. "You don't have kids," she said with a shrug. It made more sense for the house to be partly mine. I turned to my parents. "And you agreed to that?" My mother looked at Lacey with adoration I had never seen directed at me. "She has a family to think about, Ava." "And I don't," I whispered. My father sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're young. You'll figure things out." Lacey needed stability. "And what about me? Do I not get stability?" My voice broke. "Do I not deserve anything?" Lacey laughed, once low and condescending. "Not everything has to be about you." My blood turned hot. "Everything has been about you," I shot back. "Every holiday, every favor, every lie. You've taken and taken and taken." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." I flinched. "You have no right to question how we manage our home," he snapped. "You've always been too sensitive." Sensitive. Another word they weaponized against me. I forced my voice to steady. "You took advantage of me. For 3 years." My mother bristled. We appreciated your help. Appreciated. The word nearly choked me. Then why didn't you show up on my birthday? My father shook his head. Ava, you're making too much out of nothing. Nothing. My voice rose. It wasn't nothing to me. Lacey rolled her eyes. God, you're dramatic. Something snapped inside me, not loudly, but cleanly. Like a bone that had been cracked for years, finally setting itself straight. Why didn't you tell me about the house transfer? I asked again. My father hesitated. Just for a second. Lacey answered for him. Because we knew you'd make it difficult. There it was. The truth laid bare. You planned it, I whispered. You planned it all. They didn't deny it. My mother wrung her hands. We thought it was best. For who? I demanded. For who, Mom? No answer. I stepped back, breath trembling. My gaze fell on the hallway table and a framed document turned face down. Before I could move toward it, my father reached for it and slid it quickly into a drawer, eyes burning with warning. They were hiding things. Still, why would you hide something from me in my own childhood home? I asked. Don't twist this, my father snapped. We did what we had to do. For her, I said, pointing at Lacey. For the family, my mother corrected, but her voice lacked conviction. Lacey crossed her arms, smirking again. It's done, Ava. There's nothing you can do. That line settled into me like a blade. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding with something sharp and electric. As I stepped out onto the porch, my phone buzzed. Unknown number? Check the basement file cabinet. Bottom drawer. Behind the blue binder. My breath hitched. Whoever was sending the messages knew things I didn't. Things my family never intended me to know. I looked back at the house, my parents' silhouettes still visible through the curtains. Lacey leaning comfortably against the wall like she already owned everything inside. They thought they had beaten me. They thought I would fold. They thought I would stay small. They had no idea who I was becoming. I stepped off the porch, gripping my phone until my knuckles went white. I wasn't done. Not even close. The message pulsed on my phone like a heartbeat I couldn't escape. Check the basement file cabinet. Bottom drawer. Behind the blue binder. I sat in my parked car outside my apartment, building hands trembling around the steering wheel. My parents had just lied to my face about the house. Lacey had gloated like she'd won some twisted prize. And now someone who clearly knew more than I did, was pushing me deeper into the truth. Another message came through before I could even take a breath. Do it before they move things. They know you're suspicious now. A sharp coldness spread across my chest. Whoever this was, they weren't guessing. They were warning. And they were right. My family would absolutely hide anything if they feared I might discover it. I didn't sleep that night. Morning came like a dim blur, my mind wired with adrenaline and dread. By 7, I was already dressed, keys in hand, heart thudding too hard. I told myself I wasn't scared. But I was. I was terrified. Still, fear wasn't enough to stop me anymore. I drove back to my parents' house, rehearsing excuses. When Mom opened the door, she looked startled, like she expected me to disappear after yesterday's confrontation. Ava, again, I forced a small smile. I left my jacket here yesterday. Thought I'd grab it. Mom blinked clearly, trying to remember if I'd had a jacket at all. But after a moment, she stepped aside. Well, hurry. We've got a busy morning. Busy. Always busy when it came to avoiding the truth. As soon as she turned toward the kitchen, I slipped past and made my way downstairs. My heart hammered in my ears as I descended the familiar steps into the basement, the place where old boxes, forgotten holiday decorations, and pieces of my childhood gathered dust. But today it felt different. Today it felt like a crime scene. The air was colder. Still, almost expectant. I walked toward the metal file cabinet I hadn't seen in years. It stood in the corner, paint-chipping drawers slightly crooked. I pulled the handle, locked. My pulse spiked. I tried again, gently this time. Click, it opened. My father must have forgotten to lock it after using it last night. I swallowed hard, scanning the rows of neatly labeled folders. Taxes, insurance, medical, legal, house. I crouched down and tugged the bottom drawer open. Old papers, envelopes, binders. And there it was, a blue binder pushed to the back. I pulled it out, my breath uneven. Behind it lay a manila envelope with words scrawled across the front, "Transfer docs, do not discard." My hands shook as I grabbed the envelope and stepped toward the single basement window for better light. Dust floated through the sunbeam as I peeled it open. The first page made my stomach drop. A notarized property transfer, the official deed showing the ownership change. My parents' signatures. Lacey's signature. Her husband's signature. But my name was nowhere. Not even crossed out. As if I had never existed at all. My throat tightened painfully. I flipped to the next page. Emails. Printed emails between my parents and a lawyer I'd never heard of. Subject: finalizing the transfer without Ava. Another: she must not find out until this is completed. Another: if she asks questions, reassure her it's temporary. My stomach churned, the words blurred. They didn't just forget to tell me, they plotted to keep me ignorant. The next document was worse, a timeline titled Property Restructuring Plan. 3 steps: remove Ava as projected beneficiary. Add Lacey as secondary owner. Transfer full ownership to Lacey within 12 months. At the bottom, a handwritten note in my mother's cursive: do not tell Ava, she'll make this difficult. A cold wave hit my entire body. I moved to the next set of papers: bank statements, not mine, my parents', and Lacey's. Large deposits marked AW transfer lined the columns. Next to many were notes I recognized in my mother's handwriting: cover loan debt payment, Daniel's balance. Hotel furniture delivery, car repair, L mortgage. My $700 a week hadn't been for groceries or bills. I used to imagine my family scraping by, grateful for support. But here in print was the truth. They used my money to pay off thousands in gambling debt tied to Lacey's husband. They used it to fund vacations. They used it to buy furniture I'd never seen. They used it to support a life they lived without me. My chest tightened so hard I had to sit down on an old storage trunk. Then I saw the last document in the envelope, a draft letter from their lawyer. If Ava reduces or stops contributions, we may need to pursue limited power of attorney over her finances, citing emotional instability or inability to manage funds. My head spun. My vision narrowed. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. They were planning to take legal control of my money, my life, my autonomy. Not because I was unstable, not because I needed help, but because they feared I'd stop financing them. I swallowed against the rising panic, shoved the papers back into the envelope, and slid everything exactly where I'd found it. I grabbed a dusty cardboard box from the shelf to act as cover and hurried up the stairs. When I reached the top, a shadow startled me. My mother stood there. She looked surprised to see me in the hallway, eyes narrowing when she saw the box. "What are you doing down there?" I forced a breath. "Just grabbing my old stuff. Photo albums." Her gaze lingered too long, suspicious, searching, but she didn't push. "Breakfast is almost ready," she said slowly. I nodded, even though my stomach was twisted into knots. "I won't stay. I have errands." I walked out before she could ask anything else, the box tucked tightly to my chest. My hands trembled so violently, I almost dropped my keys as I unlocked my car. Inside, I set the box in the passenger seat and let my forehead fall against the steering wheel. I had expected betrayal, but not like this. Not something calculated, planned, signed, filed, hidden. Not something that told me my own family saw me as a financial tool they could manipulate and discard. By the time I got home, sunlight felt too warm, too bright, too wrong. I spread my notes, photos, and memory of the documents across the dining table. My hands moved on autopilot, organizing, categorizing, piecing together the web of deceit. A folder lay open in front of me, labeled in my own handwriting, "The Truth They Hid." I added new pages to it, and with every sheet I slipped inside, my rage cooled into something sharper, something steady, not fury, not heartbreak, purpose. As I clipped the folder shut, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, good. Now go to the safe in their bedroom. Combination is your birthday. Be quick. They're planning something tomorrow. A chill ran through me. Someone was guiding me. Someone inside their circle. Someone who wanted the truth out. I didn't know who. But I knew this much. My family wasn't done using me. And I wasn't done uncovering their secrets. The text about the safe wouldn't leave my mind. Combination is your birthday. I lay awake half the night, wondering who knew these things, who was close enough to my family to understand their habits, their hiding places, their lies. By dawn, exhaustion finally pulled me under, but it was shallow, restless sleep. When I woke again, the gray morning light felt heavy, dragging at my thoughts. My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Get a lawyer before they do. A whisper of panic rose in my throat. My family had already considered power of attorney. They had already restructured the house behind my back. If they were planning something tomorrow, I couldn't afford to wait. I forced myself out of bed, hands shaky as I dressed. I called the first family law office that popped up in my search results, my voice barely steady enough to speak. I need help, I told the receptionist. Right away. She scheduled me for a same-day emergency consultation with a lawyer named Samantha Brooks. I drove across town, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The building was a quiet brick office with clean windows and neatly trimmed hedges, too calm for the war exploding inside me. Inside, a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a soft voice, called my name. Ava, I'm Samantha. Let's talk. Her office smelled like fresh paper and lavender. I sat across from her, folder in my lap, my heart beat loud in my ears. Tell me everything, she said gently. My voice cracked as I started from the first $700 to the endless requests, to the skipped holidays, to my 30th birthday, to the anonymous messages, to the documents I'd seen in the basement. As I talked, Samantha didn't interrupt. She wrote notes occasionally, looking up with an expression that shifted from concern to anger to something colder, sharper. When I finished, my throat felt raw. She was quiet for a long moment, scanning the photos I'd taken, the list I'd compiled, the timeline I'd begun building. Finally, she said, Ava, this isn't just emotional manipulation. This is financial exploitation. Possibly fraud. The word hit me like a physical jolt. Fraud. Against me. By my own parents. Samantha continued, her voice steady. The unauthorized property transfer alone is a serious issue. If your name was previously intended for the deed and they removed it without your knowledge, that's potentially illegal. I swallowed. What do I do? We start by protecting you, she said, immediately. She laid out the first steps: freeze any joint accounts they had access to. Request certified copies of all property transfer paperwork. Pull 3 years of bank records. Prepare to challenge the transfer legally. My hands shook as I wrote everything down. It felt surreal, like this was happening to someone else. Someone foolish enough to trust people who didn't deserve it. Samantha leaned toward me. I need to ask something important. Did they ever have you sign documents without reading them? Anything that felt odd at the time? I froze. Once, a year ago, my mother had handed me a thick stack of papers while I was at her house. It's just a birthday card list I'm organizing, she'd said with a brittle smile. Sign here to show which ones you're handling. The paper had felt too stiff, too formal, but she'd stood over me watching, urging. I signed 2 pages. I didn't look closely. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. My stomach dropped now as the memory resurfaced. There was something. Last year, Samantha's pen stopped moving. Ava, that could have been part of the deed transfer. I felt suddenly dizzy. She wouldn't, she already has, Samantha cut in gently. We need copies of everything you signed. The room spun faintly. My parents, my mother, the people who were supposed to protect me had used my own trust against me. Samantha rested her hand on the table. You're doing the right thing coming here. You're not overreacting. You're responding to exploitation. Exploitation. The word felt heavy sour, but also relieving, like someone had finally named the invisible force crushing me. We spent another hour going over details I never imagined I'd discuss about my own family. Every deposit, every request, every moment, something felt wrong. By the end, Samantha had a plan that made my chest loosen slightly. When you confront them again, she said, you won't be alone, and you won't go empty-handed. I nodded, even though the idea of another confrontation made my heart race. Outside, the sun had risen fully, but it felt too bright, too sharp. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the steering wheel, letting everything settle into place. My parents had lied, my sister had taken, and someone watching from the shadows had pushed me toward the truth. When I got home, I started digging through my own bank records with a fierceness I didn't know I had. I charted out every transfer. Every time they said emergency or urgent or kids need it, I matched dates with Lacey's social media posts, vacations, new outfits, fancy dinners. It lined up, every single time. My generosity had funded their luxury. My silence had funded their life. By late afternoon, my eyes burned from reading numbers, but I kept pushing. I found receipts in my email that linked to charges I didn't recognize, ones my parents must have handled for me. I made copies, screenshots, notes. By evening, the buzzing started again. Mom, we need to talk, now. Dad, this is getting out of hand. Lacey, stop acting like this. You're being selfish. Selfish. The word made me laugh, humorless and sharp. For 3 years I'd given them everything, and the moment I asked for nothing, in return I became the villain. Around 7, my phone rang again. One more unknown number notification. Another message. They're meeting tonight. You're not supposed to know. A second if you want answers, don't wait. My pulse quickened. My parents and Lacey were planning something. Something big. Something immediate. I picked up my notebook and wrote a single sentence across a clean page. Tonight I open the safe. My hands trembled, but not from fear now. From certainty. Whatever my family had taken from me, whatever they had hidden, whatever they were still planning, I wasn't going to let them control the story anymore. This time I would be the one uncovering the truth. And I wasn't turning back. I met Samantha outside the law office the next morning, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. She greeted me with a steady nod, a thin folder in her hand. This won't be easy, she said, but you're prepared. And you're not alone. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. My parents and Lacey were already inside the conference room. Through the frosted glass, I could see the blurred outlines of their silhouettes. My father pacing, my mother sitting stiffly. Lacey slouched back in her chair like the whole thing was a ridiculous inconvenience. Samantha opened the door. The room fell silent. My father's jaw tightened. My mother blinked rapidly, her lips pursing. Lacey smiled, a slow, smug tilt of her mouth that made my stomach twist. So my father said sharply, "You're really doing this?" I sat across from them, hands folded in my lap. "Yes." Lacey huffed. "This is absurd. We're family. You don't drag family into legal offices." "We're here," Samantha said, calmly taking her seat beside me, "because they deceived and exploited my client. Let's begin." My father glared at her. "You have no right to talk to us like that." "I have every right," Samantha replied. "Ava retained me, and we're here to discuss the fraudulent transfer of property and continued financial abuse." The word abuse landed like a slap across the table. My mother bristled. "We never abused anyone." Samantha opened her folder. "Then perhaps you can explain these." She slid a printed email across the table. My mother's face drained of color. My father's eyes widened. Lacey shifted, suddenly alert. I watched their expressions carefully. The email read, "Make sure Ava doesn't find out until everything is finalized." My mother clenched her jaw. "Where did you get that?" It doesn't matter where, Samantha said smoothly. It only matters that it exists. Lacey let out a short, strained laugh. Okay, so maybe we didn't tell her everything, but that doesn't mean anything illegal happened. Samantha's eyebrow lifted. Your signature appears on documents she was never informed of. Documents that transferred ownership of a house she was promised. My father slammed a hand onto the table. She was never promised anything. I stared at him. You told me the house would be mine one day. He looked away, jaw twitching. Plans change. No, I said quietly. You changed them. Silence pulsed thickly between us. Samantha continued. Let's move on. I opened my binder, the one I labeled The Truth They Hid, and slid out a stack of papers. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice didn't. These, I said, placing copies of bank transfers onto the table, are the $700 I sent you every week for 3 years. Lacey rolled her eyes. We've already said thank you for that. No, I cut her off. You said thank you the first month. Then you stopped. You expected it. You demanded it. You used it. My father leaned forward. Ava, you're being dramatic. Samantha held up a hand. Mr. Walker, you will speak when it is your turn, not before. He looked like he might explode. I pulled out the next set of papers. These are the statements I found in the basement. The ones showing you used my money for furniture vacations debt, Samantha added, including paying off thousands of dollars of gambling debt incurred by your son-in-law. My mother gasped. That's private. So is your daughter's bank account, Samantha said. Lacey's cheeks flushed. Everyone has rough patches Daniel was going through. Not my responsibility, I said firmly. None of this was my responsibility. My father scoffed. Family sticks together. No, I said softly. Family shows up. Family doesn't drain one person dry. Lacey slapped her hand onto the table. God, listen to yourself. You're acting like we're terrible people just because we needed help. Samantha pulled out another sheet. Then explain this. She slid the budget sheet forward, the one titled Projected Monthly Support from Ava. Lacey's face drained of color. Where did you get? You planned her payments like income, Samantha said. Like she was a cash supply, not a family member. My mother shook her head desperately. We just needed stability for Lacey and her children. And I don't need stability, I asked. I don't deserve it. Lacey leaned back, folding her arms. You're young. You'll manage. I have kids. There it was. The truth spoken plainly. My parents didn't even look at me. They didn't contradict her. They didn't defend me. They simply accepted it. And everything inside me solidified. Samantha leaned back slightly. Given the evidence, fraudulent signatures, concealed transfers, financial abuse, Ava is within her rights to challenge the deed freeze accounts and pursue restitution. My father's eyes widened. Restitute? Are you insane? We're her parents, and good parents. Samantha said, don't betray their daughter. My mother clutched the edge of the table. Ava, sweetheart, we can fix this. Just drop the lawyer. I looked at her, really looked, and felt the final thread snap. You didn't show up for Thanksgiving, I said quietly. Or Christmas. Or anything. You didn't show up for me. Not once. That's not true, she whispered. Where were you on my 30th birthday? Her eyes darted away. Her hand tightened around her purse. Busy, she murmured. Busy celebrating without me, I corrected. My father's face twisted. Ava, don't do this. Don't destroy the family. I stood slowly, my legs steady beneath me. I didn't destroy anything. You destroyed us when you chose greed over love. Lacey glared at me, her voice rising. This is so stupid. You won't survive without us. I met her stare calmly. I've survived everything because of you, not with you. For the first time, Lacey didn't have a comeback. Samantha slid documents across the table, formal notices, legal filings, declarations. My parents stared at them like they were bombs. This isn't the end, my father snapped. No, I said softly. It's the beginning. As Samantha and I walked out of the office, the cool hallway air hit my face like a reset button. My hands shook not with fear this time but release, power, truth. Outside, my phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. You're almost there. One more thing. Ask them about the insurance policy. My breath froze in my chest. Insurance policy. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the message heartbeat, slowing to a chilling thud. I thought I had uncovered everything. I was wrong. The walk home from the law office felt strangely quiet, like the world had retreated a few inches away from me. My legs were shaky, my arms numb, my mind floating between relief and disbelief. I had stood up to them. Really stood up. I had heard my father stammer, watched my mother shrink into herself, seen Lacey lose her smirk, and I had walked out without collapsing. But the anonymous text wouldn't leave me. Ask them about the insurance policy. Another secret. Another betrayal waiting in the dark. Inside my apartment, I sank onto the couch and let myself breathe for the first time all day. The silence wasn't suffocating now, it was spacious, honest. Mine. My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Good. They didn't expect you to fight back. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Who are you? For the first time there was an answer. Someone who watched you hurt for too long. Before I could respond, the typing bubble disappeared. No more messages came. I set the phone down slowly, my heart unsettled. Someone had been watching all of this unfold. Someone close to my family. Someone who wanted the truth out. I didn't know whether to feel grateful or afraid. Before I spiraled into guessing games, my phone rang again. This time it was Samantha. I've submitted the first set of filings, she said. The deed transfer is temporarily frozen. No one can make changes without your consent now. I closed my eyes, tears prickling. Thank you. And the bank records are in motion, she added. We'll have proof of the financial abuse soon. Financial abuse. The phrase still rattled me each time. After the call ended, I made myself dinner for the first time in days. Nothing elaborate, just pasta and vegetables, but it tasted like something I hadn't had in years. Control. The next morning, the messages started. Dad, your behavior is unacceptable. Fix this. Mom, you're hurting the family. Ava, Lacey, if you keep this up, don't expect us to be there when you need something. I ignored all of them. By noon, Lacey sent a long block of text dripping with manipulation. You're abandoning your nieces. You don't care about anyone but yourself. Do you want people to think you're unstable? Because that's where this is going. I saved the message. Evidence. By late afternoon, Lacey became venomous. If you don't stop this, I swear, I'll post everything online. I'll ruin your reputation. Do you really think anyone will believe you over me? I took a screenshot. She was predictable in her cruelty, but something in me felt strangely calm. I wasn't the same girl who spent years begging for love in quiet ways, buying gifts, giving money, accepting scraps. I was finally choosing myself. That evening, I walked to a small cafe downtown, the kind of place I used to go before I started counting every dollar to send to Lacey. The barista looked up as I approached the counter and smiled brightly. Haven't seen you in a while. The usual. The words hit me harder than they should have. Someone remembered me. Someone noticed I'd been gone. I nodded, somehow touched that my absence mattered to someone, even if it wasn't my own blood. I sat near the window with my latte, watching people walk by, smiling with friends, holding hands, carrying grocery bags, living normal lives. I wondered how long I had paused mine in the name of being a good daughter. When I left, a familiar voice called my name. Ava. I turned to see Marlene from my parents' neighborhood, bundled up in a long coat, her warm smile soft against the winter air. You look better, she said gently. Lighter. Something in me loosened. Trying. She nodded knowingly. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stop letting people hurt you. My throat tightened. I'm proud of you, she added. I didn't know how much I needed those words until they landed. Later that night, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Hello, Ava?" a hesitant male voice said. "Yes, it's Daniel, Lacey's husband." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" he exhaled shakily. I need to tell you something. They didn't give me a choice. I didn't agree to everything. I didn't want the house." A heavy pause. "They did it. Your parents and Lacey, they pushed for all of it." My chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because," he whispered, voice trembling, "you need to know about the insurance policy." My heart pounded. "What insurance policy?" "Your parents took out a life insurance plan," he said. "A big one. A really big one. And Lacey convinced them to put her as the primary beneficiary." My entire body went still. And Daniel added, "They planned to revise everything, so she'd control all assets if anything happened." I felt cold all the way to my bones. Control, power, money. It wasn't just entitlement. It was strategy. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked again, voice barely a whisper. "Because," he said shakily, "I think Lacey is dangerous. And because you're the only one she didn't want involved." When he hung up, I sat in my silent apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The missing photos, the lies, the secrecy, the stolen money, the deed. And now a life insurance policy that made their betrayal feel darker than I ever imagined. I called Samantha immediately. She listened without interrupting, then exhaled sharply. "This strengthens your case," she said. "This shows long-term financial motive." I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying not to shake. "So I wasn't imagining it." "No," she said firmly. "You were targeted." After the call, I sat for a long time, staring at the folder on my dining table. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was the story of everything they took from me every year, every dollar, every moment I believed I wasn't enough. But there was something else too. A story of everything I was taking back. Over the next week, I slowly rebuilt pieces of myself. I cooked real meals again. I slept through the night for the first time in months. I took walks in the evening, breathing in the cold air like it was medicine. I even accepted a small design job from a community center downtown, something meaningful, something that made me feel seen for who I was, not what I could give. When I finished the project, they thanked me with a warmth I wasn't used to. "Your work is beautiful," the director told me. "We'd love to have you for a larger project." My eyes stung. Someone valued my talent, not my wallet. Every day I felt myself returning to something I lost years ago, a steady, quiet sense of self-worth. One night, after cleaning my apartment and lighting a candle in the living room, I sat with a cup of tea and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not revenge, not victory. Peace. My phone buzzed on the table. One more message from the unknown number. "There's one last thing you need to know. Go back to the safe. Look for the red folder." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, knowing this wasn't over. Not yet. And knowing I was finally strong enough to face whatever came next. I didn't want to go back into that house. Even driving down the street made my chest tighten, like the pavement itself remembered every time they'd made me feel small. But the message kept replaying in my mind. Look for the red folder. I parked 2 blocks away and walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. It was early enough that the neighborhood still felt asleep, windows dark, cars, unmoved lawns damp with morning dew. My parents' house looked ordinary from the outside, harmless even. But I knew better now. I let myself in with the spare key they'd forgotten I still had. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. My parents were creatures of routine. They wouldn't be awake for another 20 minutes. I moved quietly through the hallway, past the framed photos, none of which included me, and into their bedroom. The safe sat where it always had, tucked behind the dresser, hidden only if you didn't know where to look. I knelt, punched in my birthday, and felt the familiar click. Inside, beneath the envelopes and documents I already recognized, was a flat red folder. My hands went cold. I pulled it out, sat back on the carpet, and opened it. The first page was a letter. My father's handwriting. "Ava, if you're reading this, then things didn't go the way we hoped." My stomach twisted. "We depended on you. More than we should have. More than you ever knew." I swallowed, already feeling tears rise. "When Lacey and Daniel started struggling, we stepped in. Then your mother insisted we keep helping them. It spiraled faster than we could control. Lacey, she knows how to push. She knows how to use her children to make you feel guilty." I pressed a hand over my mouth. "She convinced us that you didn't need what we had saved. That you were strong, independent, better off. She said you wouldn't care. That you'd understand." My father's handwriting grew shaky. "But I knew. I knew you'd be hurt. I knew we were betraying you." A tear slipped down my cheek. "I wanted to tell you about the house, about the signatures, but every time your mother said it would only cause drama. I should have fought harder. You deserved better parents than us." My breath hitched. I'd waited my entire life to hear that, but reading it here, hidden away, felt like a wound reopening. The next document was a printed draft of the new deed unsigned, but it showed their next step: full transfer to Lacey alone. Then there were financial notes. My father had tracked everything, neat columns of numbers showing exactly how much of my money had gone to Lacey's debts, vacations, their furniture, even an anniversary trip my parents took. I'd paid for all of it. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, "Ava can't know about this." And under that, in my father's handwriting, "She already knows more than she should." I closed the folder slowly, the weight of everything pressing deep into my chest. They had known. They had regretted it in some quiet part of themselves, but not enough to stop, not enough to protect me, not enough to choose me. I slipped the folder back into the safe exactly as I found it and closed it. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger, or shock, or panic. I felt done. Completely, finally done. I walked out of the house as the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in soft pink streaks. The world looked new, distant, open in a way it hadn't before. When I got back to my apartment, Samantha called. "Ava, the property transfer has been reversed," she said. "Legally, everything is back where it should be. And given what you found, you have grounds to pursue further action if you want." I looked at the sky outside my window. Birds were chirping. Somewhere a dog barked. Life continued. "I don't want revenge," I said softly. "I just want peace." "You have that now," she replied, "and you deserve every bit of it." Over the next few weeks, my world became quieter in the best way. I started taking walks every morning, breathing in air that felt like mine again. I grew herbs on my windowsill. I cooked meals I hadn't made in years. I laughed, really laughed, with people who saw me as a person, not a resource. The community center offered me a larger paid design project. They called my work thoughtful, warm, meaningful. Words my family had never used for me. I said yes. One evening, as I walked home from the center, the streetlights flickering on one by one, I realized something: my life was better without them. Not perfect, not healed overnight, but better, safer, softer, honestly mine. My parents tried calling once or twice, each message a tangled mix of guilt and denial. I didn't respond. Lacey sent a long rant 2 days later, accusing me of ruining everything. When she threatened to never speak to me again, I felt a strange, gentle relief. Then, one night, I got one final message from the unknown number. "You chose yourself. I'm proud of you." I typed back, "Who are you?" This time the answer came. "Someone who saw how they treated you. Someone who knew you deserved better." I stared at the message for a long time. "Will I ever know who you are?" I wrote. "No," they replied. "You don't need to. You already know the truth." And that was the last message I ever received. A month after everything settled, I took myself out to dinner alone, not lonely. I wore a simple dress, sat by the window, and ordered a slice of chocolate cake at the end. When the waiter brought it over, he smiled. "Celebrating something?" "Yes," I said. "Myself." I lit a small candle I'd brought in my purse, breathed in the quiet moment, and blew it out with a soft, steady exhale. My 30th birthday had broken me, but this one healed me. And if you're listening to my story right now, maybe you know what that feels like. Maybe you've had people who took more than they gave, who overlooked you, who used you without ever thinking about what it cost. If you've walked away from a family that hurt you, or if you're still trying to find the courage to do it, I want you to share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear your voice the way I needed mine. And if this story touched you even a little, I'd be grateful if you liked this video. It helps more people find these stories, people who might feel just as alone as I once did. And if you want to hear more stories about justice, healing, and choosing yourself again, I'd love for you to subscribe and stay. There are more stories coming, and I'd be honored to have you here for them. Thank you for listening. None of us should have to rediscover our worth alone.